Anderson, we've also been following another group of people trying to get away from Afghanistan and come to the U.S. They are Afghans who worked very closely with U.S. forces, Afghan pilots, members of the Afghan Air Force. And in order to prevent their equipment from falling into Taliban hands, they fought until the last moment and then literally flew their aircraft out of the country. Many of them are now trying to get to the U.S., and they're discovering how hard that is. As the Taliban swept across Afghanistan and closed in on Kabul, an order went out from the head of the Afghan Air Force to pilots: get in your aircraft and get out of the country. The pilots, many of whom were trained by the United States, took dozens of planes and helicopters, flying north to safety in Tajikistan and Uzbekistan. But now they're stuck, too scared to go back, unable, for now, to get to the U.S.
Living here like a prisoner, I can say that clearly.
I spoke today with a U.S.-trained pilot in Uzbekistan, held in a camp, whose plane was shot down by the Taliban in Afghanistan as he fled. He was rescued by an Afghan helicopter pilot and flown across the border.
My aircraft got shot, and so I returned back for landing. The aircraft crashed, but that was kind of like a forced landing. My back got injured a little bit. That's why I'm in the hospital.
The pilot is a colonel we are not naming for security reasons. He says he is one of over 460 pilots, mechanics, and others in Uzbekistan. He tells me he hasn't heard from U.S. officials about what will happen next, and many of their families are still in Afghanistan trying to get out.
There's rarely a day that goes by that there's not either an Afghan Air Force member or an immediate family member that either is detained or killed by the Taliban.
Retired General David Hicks was in charge of training Afghan pilots in the United States and is now working as part of a large network called Operation Sacred Promise, trying to get them to the U.S.
It's all volunteers, former servicemen, some civilians that are actually joined the team, and then there's some that are still active duty, and they're doing all of this on their personal time, trying to get these folks out. And it's been a roller coaster ride for the last 3 weeks.
Hicks says he's also in touch with the U.S.-trained pilots in Tajikistan, where he's told there are over 140 Afghan personnel and 13 aircraft. For help, Hicks reached out to lawmakers in Congress, including Representative Austin Scott, whose Georgia district some of the pilots trained in.
People understand these are people that fought with the United States on our side of a two-decade war, and I'd like to see them allowed to come to the United States, fully vetted, come to the United States as people who fought with our troops to protect our troops and did the right thing that the United States asked them to do.
Scott says Uzbekistan wants the Afghans out of their country. Both he and General Hicks are critical of how slowly the State Department is moving.
They've known for 2 weeks and 3 weeks in each of those locations there's personnel there, and to my best of my knowledge, nothing has been done to move any of them.
Alex, what's the State Department saying about that?
Well, not very much, Anderson. They didn't respond to our request for comment. They did speak to Reuters, saying that the U.S. government is working closely with the Uzbek government, that the Afghans and their equipment are secure. There is some evidence, Anderson, that this process is moving, or at least has started. Two sources familiar with this process are telling me that biometrics have been taken from at least some of the men. That is a first step in the vetting and processing before many of these visa applicants can make their way to the U.S. Anderson.
Alex Marquardt, thanks very much.